Good day, everybody. My name is Mertz Laakso, and I'm from Dissidentklubben. This is actually my first podcast on Dissidentklubben. I'm a founding member of the Dissidentklubben, but I never been hosting a Dissident Podden before. And what is a better day to do that than to have Clare Daly as a guest?
Well,
Thank you to
I'm
the show.
honored. I'm honored. I didn't realize that we were here. We were making history here. So yeah, what better way to do it? It's the honor is all mine. I had the privilege of connecting with the Dissident Club in person, and it's great to be now on the podcast.
Thank you very much. Very many of our listeners know you, but could you just give the ones who haven't catched up to you
Sure.
yet, so just a little bit of your background?
Sure. So I was a member of the Irish Parliament for 8 years, coming from very much a trade union and community organising background. I was an independent member of the Irish Parliament, and then I went on to become an independent member of the European Parliament from Ireland. I probably became quite well known along with my fellow independent Mick Wallace, also from Ireland. Initially, when we were some of the lone voices calling for peace and international law against the backdrop of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it was a lonely time when the European war machine swung into sort of uber militarization. And then later on, I think in the horrific genocide in Gaza, where we used the European platform to speak out against European complicity, against the burning of international law and all the rest of it. So people probably would have known us from that. I didn't get re-elected in last year's European elections, so I'm no longer holding those elected, but still very politically active like everybody else in society, trying to make a better world wherever you can.
Yeah, great. I was very disappointed to hear that you were not elected. I was really hoping for that because you were a voice that a lot of us progressive people in whole Europe and in the whole world actually looked up to, and it's important to have these role models and these persons who have the platform, political platform to speak out from. But now there has been another person elected in Ireland. Could you please tell us about the presidential elections?
Absolutely. Exciting times. And I mean, I think you're right. We too were sorry at the loss of the European seats. You're absolutely right. It was an incredible platform to be able, and we feel the loss of that platform very much now as the, genocide has continued, as Europe is just ever further spending precious resources on militarization and war and so on. So that has been a loss. Interestingly, we nearly made it. We were absolutely vilified by the media consistently over our time of office, Russian agents, Kremlin stooges, all the rest of it. But we nearly won, and unfortunately we lost because the left in Ireland decided to stand somebody against me. They thought they could take the seat from me, but of course they ended up losing it and giving it to the right wing. But such is life. And I think the present juncture in Ireland with the presidential election is maybe the beginnings of an indication that the left has to get its act together. So basically in Ireland, we have an elected president. The term of office comes up every 7 years. It goes to the people. It's not just a token position, although it largely is. I mean, the primary power rests with the government. It is the president's job to appoint the government, but it would be absolutely unheard of that they wouldn't if the people elected them and, the parliament agreed to the new government. Our president isn't going to overrule that. So it is in some ways a figurehead. But there are powers in that as well. The president, if they're not happy with the legislation, can refer it to the Council of State, to the courts. And then there's a very unusual clause, which has actually never been invoked and which I have high hopes that our new president, who I'll talk about in a minute, might use, is when the president objects to a piece of legislation, and it would have to be particular circumstances, they have the right to refer that matter to the people for a referendum. And that's a hugely important tool because the backdrop to this election was quite an interesting one. Traditionally, it's been a kind of a funny campaign for presidential elections. Weird things can happen. It is one person who's up there whose name is on the ballot paper. And traditionally, the political parties, the mainstream right-wing political parties, would put forward a candidate. Sometimes they do that collectively. There would be usually they would be party members, maybe former politicians, but sometimes they would go for somebody who would be well known, not really a celebrity, but kind of well known. We've had independents standing before and doing quite well, but traditionally it has been a candidate from the right-wing parties that have got elected, except the last time around. So our current president, his term of office expires tonight. Michael D. Higgins was a member of the Labour Party, so a sort of social democratic party. And the second time he was uncontested. So he has done 14 years. And while he was a social democratic candidate, he was always on the left of that party, always someone who was very interested in international affairs and who was actually being a really good president, speaking out for peace in terms of the war in Ukraine, speaking out against Israeli genocide, and actually getting a lot of abuse from the media in Ireland and some of the political establishment for his stance. So he would be really well respected internationally. And his term, he couldn't stand another term, so we had the new election. And I suppose the left, or a colleague of mine, Catherine Connolly, she is an independent also. She worked with myself and Mick Wallace in the Dáil from the time she was elected in 2016 until we became members of the European Parliament, but we've continued to work with her since, and she would be very much identified with us, so much so that actually myself and Mick Wallace were a daily feature of the presidential campaign as they tried to vilify Catherine Connolly through association with us, that we were Russian puppets and Putin agents. So therefore she was also, and it was really unbelievably crazy stuff. So she was put forward first as an independent with the support of one of the smaller left-wing social democratic parties as a sort of a left candidate. Some of the other smaller left parties came in behind her. And then crucially, Sinn Féin, who would be the main opposition party, a party that would have been expected to have done much better in the last general election last year, maybe even end the domination of the two right-wing parties which have prevailed in the history of the state. But they didn't succeed in the last election, but they came in behind her as well. So for the first time, we had all of the opposition sort of left, middle left, centre left, soft left, hard left, nationalist left coming together, and they all supported Catherine Connolly. And I think that was key. It's an important thing that we need to discuss for the future in terms of left unity. I'm not sure it's going to last beyond this election, but it was a great way forward. So there's a whole number of interesting features around this. One was that left unity. One was the collapse of the mainstream establishment, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, who are kind of EPP type parties. They really are basically the same. They made a complete mess of the election, and it was very unusual circumstances. Normally, we'd have a whole number of candidates on the ballot paper, but this time we only had two. Now, that I know I'm explaining a lot, but it's a different system. So in Ireland, to get on the ballot paper for the presidential election, you need to be nominated by either 20 members of the parliament or 4 local authorities. If you haven't got that, you can't get onto the ballot paper. So if you're a political party with strong representation in the parliament, you can easily put up a candidate. It's not that difficult. If you're an independent, it's a lot more difficult. And traditionally, there have been independents on the ballot paper, but this time round, there were none. And there were attempts made by people, particularly people of a right-wing persuasion, to get on the ballot paper. I mean, there was an effort by Conor McGregor. People probably know him, the MMA fighter, who's actually a convicted rapist. He tried to get on the ballot paper. There were a whole number of others, the most prominent of them being a lawyer who was quite well known for her ultra-Catholic views. She would have been very involved against the abortion referendum in Ireland, against the equality legislation for gay marriage, and so on. So it would have been that sort of traditional Irish Catholic, very conservative viewpoint. Unfortunately, with her, and this is something we could discuss, she missed out by 2 nominations to get on the ballot paper. And that caused a big stir. Now, to be honest with you, even though she's completely opposed to my political views, if myself and Mick had been in the Irish Parliament, we would have given her the nomination to allow her contest that election. Because by her not being on the ballot paper, a whole number of people in Irish society felt disenfranchised, and there was a huge campaign then to spoil the vote, and actually 13% of people ended up spoiling their vote. So what we've had was a landslide victory for Catherine Connolly, but there were only 2 names on the ballot paper. She was the sort of opposition candidate, and then the government candidate was a former minister. Almost 50% of the people voted, which was quite high for a presidential election. 66% of them voted for Catherine Connolly. That's unheard of. No president ever had a stronger mandate than that. But a big chunk of the people stayed away. And there's a huge divide now, and a growing sort of what's been called a far right, and has the embryonic beginnings of a far right in Ireland now. So we've quite a divided society. So you could look at it in the one way and say, this is a landslide victory for a very strong, principled left candidate. And it is. But underneath that, there's a whole number of other things going on, because like the right-wing establishment parties made a complete mess of it. It was just unfortunate from their point of view. One of them nominated a football manager who was quite well known, and they thought, but he crumbled and had a bit of a scandal and dropped out. And the other woman just wasn't up for it. She was a minister, but she wasn't capable of being just one person before the electorate, and they kind of lost out badly on that. So if there had been other candidates put forward by those parties, it wouldn't have been as easy for Catherine Connolly. So I suppose this is the role of accident in history, because now we have someone as our head of state who's a principled anti-war, pro-peace, pro-international law activist and advocate throughout all of her political life, who won that position against the backdrop of the most disgusting campaign conducted by the Irish media to smear her, to smear those ideas, and to lay the ground for further facilitation of Ireland into growing EU militarisation, to undermine our neutrality. And the election of Catherine is very much a rejection of that. It's a vote for neutrality, for sovereignty, for anti-war, for international law, and for just the right to be different, for some hope for our people who are really on their knees. So look, it's a great result, but a whole lot of complicated things going along behind the scenes there.
Yeah. But if you look at she's maybe not the leader of Ireland, but at least one of the high representatives of Ireland. And if you look at the other politicians in Europe, there are not very many positive persons to point out. So I think it's anyhow a great move to the better, even though
it's brilliant, and I'm not in any way downplaying it. I mean, it's really, I'm just trying to maybe explain it, and it's incredibly good. And knowing Catherine, I know full well she will grow into the position. She will use that position as much as she can. I mean, when you're the president and you're head of state, it's not the same as being a member of parliament. You're not an oppositionist. You do have, I suppose, constitutional requirements that tie your hands a bit, but she is going to use that position absolutely to the max. Indeed, as Michael D. Higgins before her did. And I think at this juncture in history now, when the need for defenders of international law and for anti-militarization are so badly needed, it's a fantastic win that she is there. And the inauguration is actually tomorrow. And I've no doubt that once she settles in, she's going to be amazing. And it is a big plus. And it was hugely energized, like loads and loads of young people, many, many people who were never involved in politics before got involved in this campaign. It was presented as a campaign, a vision for a different Ireland, a sovereign Ireland in defence of our language, our history, our difference, our culture of diplomacy, our peacekeeping, all of our history, which is so, so important. But while the people voted in that way, the media are on a completely different trajectory. And even today, there's articles in the newspapers attacking her, and mainly through her association with myself and Mick Wallace. There was big talk about a visit we made to Syria 7 years ago. Nonsense, absolute nonsense, but trying to smear her as a Putin puppet and a sadist and all this absolute nonsense. But the people saw through it. And I think it's great. And the fact that the opposition parties came together for once, and the prize is there. They got the prize, and now the gauntlet is thrown down to them. Are they going to go forward now for the next general election and have that type of cooperation? Because that's the only way we will get a left alternative or a different government to the two right-wing parties that have predominated this state since its foundation.
Could this mean a new beginning for a left-wing movement on Ireland? As I understand, you have been quite strong in Palestine, organizing solidarity for Palestine, and Catherine has been very outspoken about her solidarity for Palestine. Do you think these two, her campaign and the Palestine movement, could somehow bring a new left-wing movement?
Well, you're right. They are it was the huge outrage that is in the kind of blood of Irish people about what's going on in Palestine that was a factor in Catherine's vote. No question or doubt about it. People absolutely sickened at the role of the Irish government in the face of this horrific genocide. So you have had record numbers of people mobilised around Palestine, and still have. And the people are the Irish FA Football Association now are demanding that Israel be thrown out of the soccer. We've had a long pressure to have enacted the Occupied Territories Bill, where we wouldn't trade with Israel. But behind the scenes, we still, and our political establishment, bend the knee to US imperialism first and foremost. We've a lot of multinationals here. Our government doesn't want to upset the Americans or upset the Israelis, and they've actually been involved in a huge amount of trade there. So Catherine's vote was a rejection of that. And a lot of people have been mobilised around Palestine who are new to politics, but also through Catherine's campaign. But can that be turned into a movement? Well, that is the challenge. I mean, sadly, since the election, which did bring together all of the political parties out on the ground and those involved in nothing, but since then, some of the leaders of those parties have been out of the traps. Everybody wants to claim Catherine's victory as their own, of course, even though it's Catherine's primarily. But while they want to do that, they've been kind of beginning to have a go at each other, which is bad. We don't need that. They're kind of reverting to type. So I think the formation of a new force really will come outside the existing parties and possibly through the Palestine movement. There's no doubt about it. It is the most organised and deep-rooted grassroots campaign that is in existence in Ireland at the moment. No question or doubt about that. I suppose the worrying thing on the other side of it is that we have had maybe whole swathes of our population feel left behind and abandoned. And out of that neglect, and some of that neglect came from the left, abandoning working class communities and, forgotten rural areas. We have now a growth of a far right in Ireland, with a lot of big money being pumped in from America and from Britain, seriously dangerous elements who are stoking up the flames of racism in a manner in which Ireland has never seen, almost to the point that the Irish flag, which has always been a flag of resistance, of progressive nationalism, a la the sort of affinity with the struggle against colonialism, is now almost seen as a sort of a racist one. It's a white Irish sort of a flag now, that anybody who flies that, it's kind of like being seen as that they are anti-migrant, which is shocking. And that group of the population was left out of this presidential campaign. There wasn't enough work done in working class communities. There wasn't enough of emphasis on class issues, on the poverty, on the cost of living, on the catastrophic housing crisis, on the emigration crisis, which is facing every single family because they can't afford a roof over their head or to live there. And I think it's dangerous that those communities have been abandoned. So there is, I suppose, Catherine's victory raises the possibility of an alternative, and it is really, really positive. But that now has to be built in the communities and through the Palestine movement, not just one or the other. It has to be both, and they have to be kind of united in that way, which won't be easy, but it's absolutely possible. And we're in a much better position now that she has got elected than if she hadn't. So it was a kind of an unexpected victory. The political establishment are reeling from it. They don't know what to do, and the media don't know what to do, because they have thrown absolutely everything at this. And it should be a great, I suppose, beacon of confidence to people listening that, at the end of the day, the truth will out. The stranglehold of the media, which has been such a factor in the reason why we are where we are in politics in Europe, that stranglehold has been diminished utterly. They represent nothing. They're the voice of the past. They may be, they're just puppets of US empire, really.
When you visited Sweden for 3 years ago, we were talking about NATO and militarism in Europe. How is the situation on Ireland today? Is it how are the sentiments about NATO? Is the triple lock still holding?
Well, only just about, and thankfully Catherine's in there now. So the triple lock, for people who don't know, so the Irish Defence Forces, we're a neutral country, we're supposed to be. We do facilitate the US military stopping in our civilian airport in Shannon, going across to carry out its destruction in the Middle East and so on. That's been something we've campaigned on for years, but they carry out this sort of neutral in paper, but they kind of bend the knee to the US in particular, and are very subservient. So traditionally our defence forces, and now, would only ever go abroad on a mission that is sanctioned by our parliament, our government, and only one that has a UN mandate. So that's what they call the triple lock. Other than that, Irish Defence Forces do not go abroad. We only go abroad for UN peacekeeping missions in numbers more than 12. And the government want to change that. And the only reason they want to change it is so that they can go on missions that don't have a UN mandate. I mean, their thing has been, we don't want Russia at the Security Council stopping our defence forces going to do peace somewhere. That's why we're changing it. But Russia doesn't have that power. Either there is a UN mandate or there isn't. And if there isn't one, the Irish troops can't go on it. So that's basically it. So that's what they're trying to change. There's been huge resistance to it. There's been a really good neutrality roadshow touring the whole country, which has educated people about this. Irish people hate NATO and still do. So our government has this double speak, where they say, oh my God, of course we're not going to join NATO. We'd never join NATO, but we're just going to cooperate with our European colleagues a bit more. And of course, European defence now is hand in glove with NATO defence. They say it themselves every day. It's a fact. And we had a former head of the Irish Defence Forces now is over in EU military HQ. So that morphing of contact, of getting to know each other, of working together with the Irish Defence Forces and NATO exercises is underway, even though we're supposed to be neutral. So what we have is the Irish people on the one hand who want our neutrality and who don't want us getting involved in anything, and our government on the other hand pushing us further and further into NATO involvement and EU military integration. And they dress it up in all sorts of language of European cooperation, but the truth is it's NATO integration. So I think Catherine being elected is really important. The legislation has begun to be before the Parliament. The government, as it stands, has enough people to push that through, and they have said they'll push it through. Whether the election of Catherine will change that for one of the political parties, so we have a coalition of two, but whether Fianna Fáil, the more traditionally nationalist party, will maybe now rethink that a little bit, They probably won't, because their leader is one of the biggest, hawks in Europe now at this stage, or Europhile, Micheál Martin, our present Taoiseach, but he was badly damaged by the presidential election because he foisted a candidate on the party membership over their heads. That candidate bombed and dropped out, and his popularity now has taken a wallop. So maybe some of their party will waver, but as it stands, they've enough to force that law in. So Catherine being there now as president is decisive, because she has to sign off on that. And the power remains, even though never in our history it's never been implemented, she could refer that to the people in a referendum. And I think that would be historic. I think it's exactly the type of thing she would do. I hope it is. Everything in her political life says it is. It's not something to be used lightly or often, of course. But the biggest and most important reason for Catherine being in there, the whole reason for standing, is to defend our neutrality and make a stance against militarization. So that is a beacon of hope, because we know from yourselves in Sweden and Finland and people all over that the people in your countries wanted to have a say, and you never got one. Loads of people would be anti-war and anti-militarist there, even though the media whips up a big Russia-phobia frenzy. But ye never got a say, and we're hoping now that with Catherine in there that we will get a say on this, which would be very, very important, I think. And that's on the bigger pictures as well, in terms of further EU legislation, because we are the only country where if further EU changes impact on our constitution, it has to go to the people. And, if one country objects, then it's scuppered for everybody else. So, yeah, that's pretty good. We're very happy about that. That was the whole rationale and raison d'etre for standing, and for her to win, and win so resoundingly, is just amazing. It's amazing in the face of all of the nonsense that you're used to there in Sweden, all this nonsense of Atlanticist doublespeak, of rules-based international order rubbish, of the abandonment of international law and diplomacy. So this was a blow for that, and it's great.
Yeah, I read the other day that about the economical situation on Ireland, and the news said that you either must do heavy cuts or raise taxes. What are the sentiments on Ireland about the 800 billion euros that are supposed to be put on arms race?
Yeah, I think people are, I suppose the full significance of it hasn't really sunk in. There is quite a gap in the attitudes of people with Europe. If you like, we're an island on the periphery of Europe beside another island that's left. So it's kind of, in all the surveys, we're very pro-European, and we love like traveling around and all that kind of stuff. But the actual knowledge of what goes on in Europe would be very poor. It would be rarely discussed in an accessible and knowledgeable way in either in the media or political circles. So I'm not sure the awareness is as strong as it should be, but in the circles that it is, amongst civil society groups, amongst certain sections of the parliament, and then out and about, there would be deep, deep concern about that, and certainly about the idea of Ireland ratcheting up its defence spending. Like they put a story out that we spend practically nothing compared to anybody else. They say that's terrible. We have to get up to speed. We need new equipment. We need better stuff. We certainly need to pay our defence forces more. They've been sorely neglected, and there's been huge issues of retention and so on. But what they mean when they say spending, they want us in with the big boys, buying the hardware, getting involved with NATO on the undersea cables nonsense, or buying fighter jets. What in God's name is Ireland buying a fighter jet for? Seriously? What are we going to do with that? Who are we going to fight with it? People think that's stupid, which it is. But I suppose the government and the media have concentrated on that we're very far behind. And of course we get all this, that the Russians are coming as well. Now, why they're going to bother now going all the way around Europe, by sea, presumably, to come in around the side of Ireland, I'm not sure about that. But in any case, it's laughable. But this is the mantra that we get. So people are, they don't necessarily connect the cutbacks with defence expenditure per se, but there is huge concern about the economic structure of our society. Like, we have a massive housing crisis, which has pauperized people beyond belief. I mean, the idea of owning your own home, it is becoming a pipe dream. To rent a modest, and I mean not even modest, probably a not great 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom apartment in Dublin is going to cost you €2,000. It won't even be structurally well built. Transport is grinding to a halt, and every single family has children who've had to emigrate because there's no future for them here. They can get a job, absolutely, but they can't buy a house or rent a house with the money from that job. So we've all the young people leaving for Australia and Canada, and then we've loads of people coming in from other countries to take the jobs that the Irish people won't do. And then that's being used by others to fan the fuels of racism and division. And there's quite now an ugly undercurrent that was never there before in attacking migrant centres. People of colour, be they migrant workers or whatever, feel definitely less safe in Ireland than they ever did before. And that's something that we never thought we'd really see, you know. But that's coming out of the economic divide, really, and the fact that so many people are being left behind, while at the same time, of course, record levels of wealth are being generated for the minority at the tops of society. So it's that inequality which is breeding huge problems.
Yeah, I mean, Sweden is now a member of NATO, and Donald Trump has said that we should put 5% of the BNP. 5% of the BNP maybe doesn't sound that much, but when you say that it's 26% of the government spending, then it sounds really a lot of money. And that's the way it is, because in the BNP, there's also the private consumption and the private companies turnout. So it's a huge sum of money. So we face the same problems here in.
I think everybody across Europe, I mean, okay, the numbers wouldn't be as big in Ireland, but from where we're at now, it's a huge leap what they're talking about and spending in defence. And I think people all across Europe are beginning to ask the questions, what is this for? Where is this going? I mean, clearly, like their attitude to the war in Ukraine, all they did was make sure it kept going. More working class Ukrainians got killed, more working class Russians got killed, and more Ukrainian land got taken over. But meanwhile, the profits of the arms companies are booming, and it's the same in Gaza. And I think people see it, and I think Gaza, certainly in Ireland, was a turning point for people, because they realised that all of the nonsense, and it was only obviously the European establishment couldn't care less about Ukraine or Ukrainian people or anything like that, but they talked the talk that they were defending Ukraine. But when they saw how they defended Israel, then that became just absolute nonsense. And so many people have seen through that in Ireland now. It's been the big change there, actually.
Yeah, well, there's a small indications about people starting to realize the changes, and but there is, and you could also say that because the globalists and the leaders in the EU are so they are showing fear, I would say, and like Ursula von der Leyen now, she's saying that we need to start work against news from Russia and China. It's not about the Chinese and Russian news, but any news about Russia and China. When you start to see that as a threat, then you notice that your own position is not that strong.
It's incredible. I mean, they're in total crisis. I mean, the European economies are absolutely on their knees, and they're on their knees because of their own actions. Like, their sanctioning of Russia ended up being a sanctioning of themselves, and there's a deep-seated crisis. I mean, they wonder why AfD is growing in Germany, but the German government are proposing to raise pensions in Germany to 73. Join the dots, lads. You know, there's reasons for this. You're spending all this money on militarization. Conditions are getting worse for people, but they don't seem to have any solution other than more of the same, or other, as you say, to shut out alternative views. And that's driving more and more people crazy, really, because, you know, they talk about combating authoritarianism, but the European Union has become incredibly authoritarian, where the right to dissent, the right to have a different opinion, the right to organize is being curtailed in so many areas. It's incredibly dangerous. And it is, as you say, the acts of desperation. I mean, there's no question to my mind the European Union will crumble at some stage. It's not maybe in the short term. There's too many people with vested interests in keeping it going, but it's impossible that it would continue long term. And the seeds of that, I know, annihilation, crumbling, whatever you want to call it, disintegration, are well sown as a result of their approach to the war in Ukraine initially, and then to Gaza.
Yeah. Are you going to participate the inauguration tomorrow, or are you?
We're invited, but I can't go, unfortunately. We have to go to Italy. Mick is in Italy, and I have to get back there. So we'll be there in spirit.
Okay.
So the media, no doubt, will be disgusted that we were invited, but unfortunately we can't go. Yeah. But
anyway. Great. Yeah. Well,
but it'll be a great day. A great day.
Yeah. What are your main topics in what you are doing today?
We're trying to do what we always did. We have our own podcast, I Foresee Trouble, with Daly and Wallace. So give you a little plug for that there. And we're still around and about active. We were in Yemen earlier in the year. We're going to Tehran at the end of next week for a conference on international law. We've been at many Palestine events. We were supposed to go to the COP in Brazil, but didn't go to that. So just using the platform, I suppose, and the standing that we had to, you know, travel internationally and do work in Ireland. We've done work around the neutrality issue, of course, at home with that roadshow. So yeah, just anywhere people are active, we try to go and talk the talk, because at the end of the day, it's ordinary people organized that changes things. So anywhere you can get a platform to talk to people, to exchange views, be it podcasts, be it conferences, visits, it all adds up, because the people you're talking to are the nuggets who will change things in the future, because politicians don't change things, people do. The politicians are dragged screaming and kicking. So yeah, we like to organize people so that they can drag politicians screaming and kicking. So we'll keep doing that in any case. Like yourselves, we're active dissidents now. We just dissent where we can.
Yeah, if you have the possibility, you're always welcome to Sweden to.
Well, we would love to, and we couldn't because of other issues. We couldn't make it there this year, but yes, next year, absolutely, yeah. Always willing.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much, Clare Daly. Always nice to talk to you.
And best of luck to the Dissident Club.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.